Hi, I'm Abby. I have so much Aquanet in my hair that I am probably a fire hazard. I also have a lot of records. And this. This is the Vinyl Monday 80s episode. Welcome everyone to the third annual Vinyl Monday 4th of July special. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection, usually from the 60s. If 30-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. For this year's 4th of July celebration, we have a very special episode on our hands. The closest we've ever made it to an 80s episode on this channel was London Calling. That was released in December of 1979. In case you could not tell, this week's album is firmly planted in the 80s. In fact, it just celebrated its 40th anniversary. I missed it. I was busy with other stuff, but we're celebrating it today as we celebrate another birthday of this utterly unchained country we call the United States of America. This week's album, Vinyl Monday's very first 80s installment, is Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what next week's album is gonna be. I host polls where sometimes you get to pick what's on the series. I make announcements when I'm places that aren't here, like my podcast. You can find all of that on my channel. All right, let's take the plastic off. My copy is, to my knowledge, an original. I don't have very many 80s albums in my collection at all, as you could probably tell. The ones I do have, I inherited from my aunt, I think. These acquisitions were some of the first in my collection, predating the 2019 inherited someone's entire collection chapter. Here's the thing about original copies of Born in the USA. They're all gonna sound like ass. The maximum amount of music you can cram on one side of an album is 25 minutes, so a single LP's runtime would be 50 minutes of music max. It won't sound great, but it will be there. Born in the USA's runtime is about 48 minutes. These guys pushed the limitations of the vinyl format, a practice indicative of cassettes slowly encroaching upon what used to be the primary music listening format, as well as CDs. Born in the USA was the first album to be released mass market on CD in America. Another reason it's so hard to find a decent sounding copy of this album. There were so many hits on it that any number of them could have their grooves worn to hell. It just depends on the taste of the previous owner. For both these reasons, my copy sounds quiet overall. I'm sure there are better sounding runs out there, but this is what we have to work with. Now that we're through with that, let's talk about one of the most iconic album covers in rock and roll history. It's right up there with Dark Side, Abbey Road, and London Calling. Born in the USA is instantly recognizable from the record store shelf and from your collection shelves. It's all thanks to the minds of two women, designer Andrea Klein and photographer Annie Leibovitz. Annie isn't just one of the rock and roll photographers, she's one of the photographers. All the most iconic shots of Bruce are by her. This is a very graphic cover. Red and white stripes, bright white t-shirt, blue jeans, red hat. It's bold. Almost Roy Lichtenstein pop art exaggerated. This is the second American flag cover I've featured on my channel. The first was the red, white, and black There's a Riot Going On, and I also can't ignore Born in the USA's resemblance to the Sticky Fingers cover. Just one is the front side and the other is the back. Bruce famously has his back turned to the camera. This creative decision ruffled some feathers upon release. When asked why this shot won over something a little more objective, Bruce simply said, quote, "The picture of my ass looked better than the picture of my face." We have two inserts, one serving as the inner sleeve with album credits, Bruce's face this time, and shots of the E Street Band. The actual insert has all of our lyrics. B-roll Abby will be happy to show you all of this. On Born in the USA, we have the boss himself, Bruce Springsteen, on vocals, guitar, and serving as principal songwriter. He is backed by his E Street Band, which at the time consisted of Steve Van Zandt on guitar, Clarence Clemens on sax, Danny Federici on keys, Gary Talent on bass, and Max Weinberg on drums, with backing vocals by Ruth Jackson and La Bamba. Born in the USA was produced by Bruce Springsteen, Chuck Plotkin, Steve Van Zandt, and Bruce's manager, John Landau. If I had a nickel for every time John Landau produced a record with this extremely specific abbreviation, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice, right? The other BITUSA was engineered by Toby Scott, mixed by Bob Clearmountain. Roll a totally tubular transition. To fully understand Born in the USA and its importance to Bruce Springsteen's greater catalog, you need to know Nebraska. I know there are way more people who are way more lost in the boss sauce than myself, or even my boss consultant this week, my buddy Mark. For all intents and purposes today, we're calling Nebraska the prequel album. Bruce had a few top 40 hits under his bedazzled belt by now, like Born to Run and Fade Away and such, and was dealing with the anxiety that comes with being famous. No one's brain is equipped to handle fame, right? We are only monkey. Bruce wrote to cope. Out of this spell came folk songs about characters in this town in the middle of Nebraska or some shit. It handles some of the same themes the follow-up would, desperation and dead-end towns, but it's got about 100% more murder. Sonically, it's very different. Nebraska is essentially a collection of demos. And that's because it is. The way Bruce and his E Street Band would work is that Bruce would demo the songs at home on a 4-track machine. Just him, a guitar, a real wham bam thank you ma'am backing vocal, and a handful of whatever other instruments he had lying around. He'd hand off these tapes to the band, who would then write their own arrangements. Nebraska was the exception, it was unarrangeable. So Bruce said fuck it and released the demos as the album. A very important song to our story today came from around the time of Nebraska sessions. Its working title was Vietnam. I know Vinyl Monday has only spent a matter of minutes in the 80s, but we already have to go back in our timeline to about 1968. Our man Bruce had just dropped out of college and was playing in a band called Earth. No, not that one. When him and a couple of his bandmates were summoned for their draft physicals. This is how Bruce described that day to Rolling Stone magazine some 16 years later. Quote, "I remember being on that bus, me and a couple of guys in my band, and the rest of the bus was probably 60-70% black guys from Ashbury Park. And I remember thinking, what makes my life or my friends' lives more expendable than that of somebody who's going to school? Bruce got out of going to war. He crashed his motorcycle the year before and got a pretty serious concussion. What is it with Vinyl Monday and motorcycle crashes? This is getting weird." But the drummer of his first band, the Castiles, did not get out of it. He was shipped out, and he came home in a box. Bruce remembered this. And he remembered how, for all the talk his World War II vet dad was on about how going to war will straighten you out and make you a real man, he was relieved when his son failed the physical. Bruce originally wrote Vietnam from the point of view of a young man who died in the war, but he felt it was in poor taste with the whole E Street Band saxophone shtick and all. In the words of Jeffrey Himes, quote, "Okay," Springsteen might have told himself, "I've got this character who went to Vietnam to shoot people and get shot at in return. Now he's back in New Jersey without a job or prospects. What happens next?" More context for the youngins here, younger than I don't know what they're teaching in American history classes these days. There was a really weird and sad chapter in American history where the Vietnam War was so deeply unpopular that the boys who came home were outcasts of society. This is how Bruce described it at a gig in LA on August 20th, 1981. Quote, "It's like when you feel you're walking down a dark street at night, and out of the corner of your eye you see somebody getting hurt or somebody getting hit in the dark alley, but you keep walking on because you think it has nothing to do with you and you just want to get home. Well, Vietnam turned this whole country into that dark street, and unless we're able to walk down those dark alleys and look into the eyes of the men and women that are down there and the things that happened, we're never gonna be able to get home." Spoiler alert, American veterans are still not treated well. Those who have served are more likely to experience alcoholism, addiction, homelessness. We don't have great systems in place to aid any of those things, let alone get vets treatment for PTSD. Real cheery episode we got here. Bruce was getting really deep into all this, so either John Landau or a chance meeting with Born on the 4th of July author Ron Kovic facilitated a meeting between the boss and Bobby Mueller, founder of veterans' rights activist group the Vietnam Veterans of America. After their 15-minute chat became an hour, Bruce turned that LA show into a fundraiser for the group. This blew my fucking mind when I first heard it. There were as many as 90 songs in the running for Born in the USA. 90. 90. Why did this happen? Because recording was spread out over almost 2 years. We do not have the time today to go into the minutia of what exactly was recorded when, but I can give you a rough outline of how this album morphed into what we know it to be today. Surrounding a possible inclusion of the song on a soundtrack for a film that Bruce was maybe going to star in, Vietnam morphed into the title track. The demo process began before Nebraska's release via a session for Mr. Quarter to Three himself, Gary U.S. Bonds. One of the earliest songs worked out for the record was Workin' on the Highway, a rewrite of Child Bride for Nebraska Sessions. Honest to Goodness Sessions began in April of 1982 with full band arrangements of Darlington County, I'm on Fire, I'm Going Down, and Glory Days. The initial production roster includes music critic turned producer and Bruce's manager John Landau, producer Chuck Plotkin, and E Street Band guitarist Steve Van Zandt. Production is put on pause when Bruce goes out to California and seeks therapy. There, he demoed My Hometown and others. My Hometown bears a strikingly similar chord resemblance to Hungry Heart off the River. I do not know if this was intentional. He brings this stuff back to New York in the summer of 1983 to cut them with the full band. But in that time, Steve has left the project kind of. He half left, due in part to just not jiving with Landau anymore. Bruce was really in his feels about the strained bromance, so much so that the album's liner notes have a dedication to Steve in them. In Italian, it's an approximation of Bon Voyage, my brother, little Steven. Directionless as this may be, Bob Clearmountain enters the chat to mix what they have, and at some point, recording moves to Power Station. sensation. Fast forward again, we're at the 2-year mark now, and the project finally gets the Born in the USA title. We have at least 6 songs that are definitely going to be on this thing. Landau's like, "Hey boss, might I remind you, we still don't have a lead single." The very next day, Bruce brings in Dancing in the Dark in its entirety. Say what you will about the man being cheesy, but when he's up against the wall, he delivers. Dancing in the Dark was more mellow and synthy than the bulk of the stuff that had been recorded at this time, so production has a dilemma on their hands. How do we marry the signature E Street style, lofty, anthemic saxophone with the new? Easy. At Steve's behest, they throw No Surrender in there. Somehow, by the grace of God, between 70 and 90 songs were narrowed down to 12. We have Chuck Plotkin to thank for the album having such a hard pop focus. He outright rejected Bruce's potential track listing in favor of his own, which began with Born in the USA and ended with My Hometown. We also have Chuck to thank for working on the highway, making it onto the record, The Absolute Madman. Of those final 12 songs was a tune Bruce originally wrote for Donna Summer, because at this point, why the hell not? The final track listing of Born in the USA goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have our title track, Born in the USA, followed by Cover Me, then Darlington County, next Working on the Highway, then Downbound Train, and side 1 closes with I'm on Fire. Opening up side 2, we have No Surrender, followed by Bobby Jean. Then I'm Going Down, next Glory Days, then Dancing in the Dark, and the album closes with My Hometown. Born in the USA was released in June of 1984. Across a period of a year and a half, 7 of the 12 songs were released as singles. Each one landed somewhere in the top 10 of the Billboard Hot 100 singles charts, but somehow none of them would hit number 1. Bruce was just getting constantly cock-blocked. Dancing in the Dark, number 2, cock-blocked by Duran Duran, not even one of the good Duran Duran songs. The Reflex by Duran Duran. Cover Me, number 7. This one shocked me. The title track, number 9. I thought for sure this would have been a number 1 considering how much we hear it on classic rock radio. I'm on Fire, number 6. Glory Days, number 5. I'm Going Down, another number 9. And My Hometown, number 6. Some of these would land number 1s via auxiliary charts like the rock singles chart and the adult contemporary hits, but it's wild that none of them managed to be a number 1. Of all those songs that didn't make the core track listing, a decent chunk of them became B-sides. Pink Cadillac backed Dancing in the Dark, a live cover of Tom Waits' Jersey Girl backed Cover Me, and backing My Hometown was... No, hold on. This cannot be right. Santa Claus is coming to town? Why were there so many singles off Born in the USA? You can thank Michael Jackson for that. He was the king of pop, the king of MTV, and the king of the music video. There were so many hits off Thriller, 5 number 1s, if I'm not mistaken, that other record labels had to scramble for their acts to keep up. Due to the MJ effect, Columbia just kept chucking out singles from Born in the USA, stuff that wasn't even intended to be a single. And a good number of them did have music videos. I never get to talk about these on this series because the music video as we know it today didn't exist until Mike Nesmith did Elephant Parts, then sold the series that would become MTV. Of note today is the video for Dancing in the Dark, directed by Brian De Palma, This video would be future Friends star Courtney Cox's big break. I think it's safe to say all those singles and videos fared well, and for a couple years there, some guy from New Jersey in a tight white t-shirt was as big a star as MJ and Madonna. Bruce Springsteen, Madonna, way before Nirvana. I don't think us Zoomers quite understand how unfathomably famous MJ, Madonna, Bruce, Prince were in their prime. Imagine how unfathomably famous Taylor Swift is. She so much as breathes and makes $100 million. In the 80s, music, television, and movies weren't just a part of the culture. They were a fixture of the culture. You couldn't just hop on YouTube and watch a music video after you got out of work. You had to crowd around the TV in hopes you'd catch the hot new thing. Music was water cooler talk. My mom graduated from high school in '87. In her words, that was our life. So it's safe to say the magnifying glass suddenly thrust upon Bruce Springsteen was massive. The tour for Born in the USA was huge, one of those era-defining events. We think the 3-hour Eras tour set list is long. Bruce and his band were playing for nearly 4 hours every night. But when I tell you the general public misunderstood the meaning of the title track to a truly impressive degree, for those who didn't or couldn't look beyond the surface level, it was a celebration of good old-fashioned American values. Yup, no existential dread here. Even the music press couldn't clock the true meaning of Born in the USA. Cashbox described the single as, quote, the affirmation of the boss's rich faith in himself and his country, a straight-ahead anthem that celebrates America's traditional values and the common man. It pounds out with bold confidence. They were right about it finding a strong AOR audience, but not much else. Of course, we can't forget the infamous piece George Will wrote for the Washington Post. He starts off by saying, quote, there is not a smidgen of androgyny in Springsteen, which is hilarious seeing as Bruce himself stated in his autobiography he looked a little fruity in the 80s. This is the real shiner though, quote, I have not got a clue about Springsteen's politics, if any, but flags get waved at his concerts while he sings about hard times. He is no whiner, and the recitation of closed factories and other problems always seems punctuated by a grand, cheerful affirmation. Born in the USA. George, you were so excruciatingly close to getting it. Side note, either the article's title was changed in the Post's online archive sometime in the past 40 years, or the Wikipedia page has mistitled the article as a Yankee Doodle Springsteen. To my knowledge, Yankee Doodle Springsteen was in fact some kind of advertising slogan. What else was going on in 1984? Something significantly less funny than Bruce prancing around on stage in his bandanas, or George having a certified r/whoosh moment? Ronald Reagan. The answer is Ronald Reagan. The first of many, many politicians to completely miss the meaning of Born in the USA and therefore make it a campaign theme song. One of them, though the term politician could be a pretty loose classification in his case, co-opted the red hat. It's important to note that Chris Christie, of all people, got the meaning of the song about a boss show he attended in his youth. Quote, with a bandana on and a cut-off shirt and the fist pumping, it felt like a celebration of being born in the USA, when really, it's a defiant song about, I was born in the USA and I deserve better than what I'm getting. I think plenty of people didn't get what it was about, including the President of the United States. That president he's referencing is Reagan. So, what do I think of Born in the USA? Going in, I thought I was gonna hate this thing. I am much more of a Galaxy 500, Jesus and Mary chain, The Cure, Pixies, Sonic Youth kind of 80s. Born in the USA is peak 80s. The synths, the super big drum kick that Phil Collins afflicted upon music. Boy, do I wish he kept in the air tonight to himself. Bruce gets a bad rep. He's earned the title of Uncle with Tie on Head at the family wedding music. My childish dumb baby impression was 7 out of 12 songs is a pretty full picture. I can comfortably spend most of Born in the USA on Born in the USA. That is not what happened! But in order to get into the full album experience, we have to get this damn song out of the way. Born in the USA addresses the blind nationalism that takes foot in working class areas. It's blind faith, the sentiment of, I am American, born in the land of the free and the home of the brave. It's the greatest country on earth. Therefore, I am entitled to everything I aspire to in life. Through the lyrics, the narrator of this song is realizing, oh shit, being a proud American did not save me from the worst America has to offer. The systems in place that were supposed to help me were made of little more than construction paper and Elmer's glue. What the hell did I even fight for? In the tradition of the Vinyl Monday 4th of July special, where I spotlight the America song of the record, I'm gonna spoon feed Born in the USA to you, line by line. Born down in a dead man's town, the first kick I took was when I hit the ground. The first verse, intentional or not, reads as a rewrite of Albert King's Born Under a Bad Sign. I've been down ever since I was 10. If it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. But there's no swaggering confidence or wearing your misfortune like a badge of honor here. Our narrator wears it as a chip on his shoulder. Got in a little hometown jam, so they put a rifle in my hand, sent me off to a foreign land to go and kill the yellow man. Last line is pretty obvious. The first might not be as so. I'm reminded of the story of how Jimi Hendrix ended up in the army. He was caught in a stolen vehicle. The judge gave him the choice of serving time or serving in the army to straighten him out. A lot of naive young men, when faced with that very same decision, chose the army because getting to wear cool uniforms and shoot guns all day is way better than prison, right? Come back home to the refinery. Hiring man says, son, if it were up to me. Went down to see my VA man. He said, son, don't you understand now? After serving, this guy came home to no job and found out the hard way that the government doesn't have much support to offer him. My favorite verse goes as follows. Down in the shadow of the penitentiary, out by the gas fires of the refinery, I'm 10 years burning down the road. Nowhere to run, nowhere to go. It's been a decade since he came home. Our narrator is frustrated and hopeless. His trauma has frozen him in time while everybody else just gets to carry on. I'd be pissed off too. Bruce described how he goes about crafting a song like this. Quote, the pride was in the chorus. In my songs, the spiritual part, the hope part, is in the choruses. The blues and your daily realities are in the details of the verses. Considering the tremendous weight behind the verses, they turned the Born in the USA chorus from proud to bitter. Once you clock what's going on here, Born in the USA is a really heavy song. That being said, this production does not do it for me. That is my biggest hang up throughout the rest of the record. These are not sounds I gravitate towards, especially those goddamn compressed to hell snare hits. The arrangement isn't anything groundbreaking. The music doesn't really go anywhere. Just when it starts to get where it's going, when the glossy 80s perfection mask slips, the song ends. Maybe that was their intention. Upon first listen, I did not care for the next 3 songs. I still don't really. Cover Me, Darlington County, and Working on the Highway are pure mid-80s corporate pop rock, but I understand their purpose in the greater narrative. They lull you into a false sense of security. Especially Working on the Highway, this upbeat, overly energetic production that Mark described impeccably as, and I quote, manic, baseball stadium energy. My god, I have so many friends that would make such better critics than me. My buddy Michael also described this production better than I ever could by simply declaring, "Where's my fucking funnel cake?" I've also seen a lot of comparing Working on the Highway to Chuck Berry. Number one, the 80s were a huge time for 1950s and early 60s revival in fashion, movies, and music. Number two, Chuck Berry wrote back in the USA after getting out of jail for, drum roll please, violating the Mann Act. Darlington County also has a really great wait, what just happened? Moment in the lyrics. The punchline, driving out of Darlington County, seen Wayne handcuffed to the bumper of a state trooper's Ford. This guy just let his buddy take the fall for whatever they did. That's so fucked up that I just laughed. Oh, yeah, there's the obligatory saxophone. For me, Downbound Train is really where Born in the USA begins. Bruce is wounded as he sings of love corrupted by having to work yourself to the bone just to get by. That and the synth that creeps low like fog or smog gives the feeling of being lost in the shuffle of one of the biggest countries in the world. A forlorn cog in the star-spangled machine. I knew I'm on Fire going in. I really liked it. It's the intimacy needed after 4-ish songs of high 80s pop. I appreciate the electric guitar arpeggios. I love when synths hang in the background as opposed to being right up front. The boss's delivery does not always work for me. He can be so goofy and overblown that, to be completely honest, his A1 sauce voice drowns out the meat and potatoes that are his lyrics. But he pulls back for I'm on Fire. He can never go wrong with a sultry, feverish I Want You song. This part of the record feels like sweating through your sheets because your window AC unit is broken and the train whistle is screaming through the night because the only apartment you can afford is right on the freight train tracks. But it doesn't matter, because you're gonna drive through the sticky, humid night to climb into your girl's window. Bruce nailed this. On that podcast episode, Mark said this, quote, "How much more would I gain by listening to like the 5 songs that didn't get on the radio? Here's your answer. Literally everything. No Surrender, the beginning of the B-side, gave me my Frank Reynolds tears in my eyes, I get it now moment. I grew up in New England, and not this New England, the real New England. Bitter, desperate, loudmouth New England. I am of no pedigree. There were cars on cinder blocks in my driveway growing up, and I understand how NASCAR works. On No Surrender, the feeling just clicked, and the rest of the record was an emotional journey I was not prepared for. I know it's technically an artifact of the Bruce-Steve bromance. It's only on the album because Steve pushed really hard for it, but No Surrender feels like the joy of growing up with no pedigree or pretenses. We learned more from a 3-minute record baby than we ever learned in school. The Loss of Innocence reads like a part 2 of Born to Run. Young faces grow sad and old, and hearts of fire grow cold. Later, now on the street tonight, the lights grow dim. The walls of my room are closing in. There's a war outside still raging. You say it ain't ours anymore to win. You can't run forever, but you can white-knuckle that optimism. Considering that theme, I find it interesting John Kerry used this for his presidential campaign song. Again, the keys are really shrill for my taste, but the heart of No Surrender spoke to me. Though No Surrender reads as Born to Run 2 Electric Boogaloo, Bobby Jean feels like it. The crowded maximalist arrangement, bold and wistful piano, and Bruce's face-turned to the wind defiance are on full display. It's classic Bruce, and thanks to the E Street Band, it's a classic sound I needed to feel this album. This could have been made in 1975, the same as 1983, or even 2024, though it might be a little more difficult to capture. Correct me if I'm wrong, but from my interpretation, this song is explicitly about the Bruce-Steve bromance rough patch. Baby is thrown in to mask it as a love song, and Little Steve was changed to Bobby Jean. Bobby Jean is proof that friendship breakups can be just as messy, complicated, and painful as relationship breakups are, if not more so. The meet cute is the same, we liked the same music, we liked the same bands, we liked the same clothes. The loyalty is the same. You hung with me when all the others turned away and turned up their nose. The bond isn't exactly the same, but it's just as fierce. There ain't nobody, nowhere, no how gonna understand me the way you did. So it hurts just the same when you're sitting in a hotel room in the middle of nowhere and you hear the song you played together. I'm Going Down is underrated. On surface level, it's a bland but still infectious pop hook. Dig a little deeper, and it's about the epidemic sweeping the nation, the issue every young, once defiant pair of high school sweethearts who never left their hometown has to contend with. Losing the spark. This admittance subverts Bruce's macho shtick. I love his delivery of "my kisses used to turn you inside out." The saxophone solo happily buzzing away is a bold choice, but I should have known this band was gonna make it. Same with the goofy scatting. I have no idea where that came from, but I thought it was funny. The hand clap break is a little stadium rock cliche, but what do I expect? This was made at the height of stadium rock. Having grown up with country radio in the mid-2000s with all their songs about "I love this bar" and "I got some famous friends you've never heard of," Glory Days is the song calling all those guys lame. You're right, Bruce. Peaking in high school is cringe. When I see guys hanging their track team jerseys in frames in their homes, or like ladies squeezing into their prom dresses, I die inside a little. But we all fall prey to nostalgia somehow. Think I'm going down to the well tonight, and I'm gonna drink till I get my fill. And I hope when I get old, I don't sit around thinking about it. But I probably will. At the end of the day, we are all prone to pining for better times. They weren't better, you just had less responsibilities because you were 16. Looking at this channel's usual fare, you may be surprised to learn that Dancing in the Dark is one of my favorite pop singles of all time. The synth mania makes it one of the most obnoxiously 80s cuts on here. The guitar dripping in is such a relief, but it's a near perfect song. I always understood Dancing in the Dark as a song about feeling like the walls of mundanity are closing in. Having fire in your belly, but having the fear of turning out just average. It's we gotta get out of this town, but 10 years older and a little more world weary. In the context of the record, Dancing in the Dark decimated me. It's not just a song about feeling stifled as a creative, it's feeling stifled as a creative and emotionally, romantically atrophied when you have to work so damn hard just to make ends meet. It paints my favorite verse in a completely different light. Messages keep getting clearer, radio's on, and I'm moving around my place. I check my look in the mirror, want to change my clothes, my hair, my face. It's like he's pleading with himself. I can totally see how this song has grown men crying at a Bruce Springsteen concert. This had me fucked up getting ready for last week's episode. The closing track is about never leaving your hometown. The loss of innocence when you find it's not as idyllic as you once thought, and seeing the place decay around you. It's less frustration and more resigned acceptance, with spacey synths, a little tambourine, and a restrained delivery. This song still speaks to me. Mentally, I will never leave that place. I will never know how not to work myself to death. When I find myself in a nice little New England town that people call a village, with bespoke coffee shops and used bookstores, I feel like a fraud. My hometown is the tragedy of the American dream. Whether you realize it in the moment or not, In the middle of the night, you wake up. Never in my life did I think I'd be saying this about a mainstream pop rock record released in the summer of 1984, but Born in the USA captivated me. I was expecting beefy 80s corporate rock and some fucking guy from Jersey, and I did get that. But I also got one of the most sweeping, heartfelt, fiery yet vulnerable pop rock albums ever. The production may not always be my cup of tea. It's a little too big, but when it settles down a bit, I can't help but be overcome in a wash of glory and grief. The narrators are complex, morally gray. Sometimes they're pieces of shit, but you find yourself rooting for them most of the time. When you set the cheese aside, Bruce has a natural charm. You want to save these narrators, but you can't. You want to save yourself, but you don't know how. I don't even drink anymore, but when I'm driving into my hometown and I see the lights of that dingy discount liquor store sign, I feel at home. I hate that it's romantic, seductive, reveling in being trashy. I hate that it's so disarming, and I hate that it kind of works. That's the tragedy of Born in the USA. My personal favorites off this one are Bobby Jean, I'm on Fire, Dancing in the Dark, and My Hometown. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That's the first 80s Vinyl Monday in the books. That was Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. What do you think of this album? What do you think of The Boss? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet has to say, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 and a new episode of my podcast every other Friday at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Hopefully with less Aquanet in my hair. Bye!